The Galactic Hub Cafe sat at the crossroads of 7 different space lanes, where creatures from every corner of the galaxy stopped for a quick meal or a strong drink. Inside, the noise was constant, a mix of clicking mandibles, whistling respirators, and a dozen different languages all blending together into one chaotic mess. But for Lily Brooks, it wasn't chaos at all. It was home. Lily's fingers moved across the Braille menu display near the counter, double-checking the daily specials even though she'd memorized them hours ago. Her white cane stayed tucked in her apron pocket where it had been since her second week on the job. She didn't need it anymore. After 6 months of working here, she knew every table, every chair, every crack in the floor tiles. The cafe had become an extension of her own apartment. Familiar, predictable, safe. "Hey Lily, table 7 just sat down," her coworker Ben called from behind the espresso machine. "Looks like he wants coffee." "Got it," Lily replied, grabbing the thermal pot from the warmer. Her left hand found the edge of the counter, her anchor point, and she started walking. 16 steps straight ahead. Pause at the 3rd support pillar. Slight turn left. For more steps. Table 7. She'd made this walk hundreds of times, weaving between customers without hesitation. Her sneakers squeaked slightly on the polished floor, a sound she used to gauge her distance. The ambient noise of the cafe told her where people were sitting. She could hear the soft rustle of the insectoid-clicking species at table 3, the heavy breathing of the aquatic nereids in their water booth at table 5. What she didn't hear was the sudden drop in conversation volume. She didn't notice how the usual cafe chatter had died down to nervous whispers. She couldn't see the way other customers were staring, some frozen with their drinks halfway to their mouths, others slowly backing toward the exit. At table 7 sat a creature that most sentient beings in the galaxy would recognize instantly. He was enormous even sitting down. His body was covered in crimson scales that caught the overhead lights and threw them back in shades of deep red and burnished gold. Thick armor plating ran down his chest and arms, each plate etched with scars, some thin as paper cuts, others wide as canyons. His wings were tucked against his back, but even folded they took up the space of 3 regular chairs. 2 massive horns curved back from his skull like a crown, and his eyes, bright amber with slitted pupils, could track the movement of a single dust particle across a room. This was General Ryan Ashford, Supreme Commander of the Draconian Imperial Fleet. He had conquered 40 star systems. His name was spoken in hushed tones across 100 worlds. Battle commanders studied his tactics. Politicians feared his decisions. Entire planets had surrendered rather than face him in combat. And right now he was sitting in a college girls' section at a cafe, waiting for coffee. Lily reached the table and smiled in his general direction, her clouded eyes looking somewhere past his left shoulder. "Hi there. Welcome to Galactic Hub. What can I get started for you today?" Ryan stared at the human. She was small, barely reaching 5.5 feet tall if he had to guess. Young, probably early 20s by human standards. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her black apron had a coffee stain near the bottom that she'd clearly tried to scrub out. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. They were unfocused, moving slightly but never quite landing on anything specific. She was blind. Completely, genuinely blind. She had no idea who, or what, was sitting in front of her. "Coffee," Ryan said, his voice coming out as a deep rumble that made the water glasses on nearby tables vibrate slightly. "Black. No sugar." Lily tilted her head, a gesture Ryan would come to recognize as her thinking face. "Rough day?" The question caught him completely off guard. Ryan Ashford, who had negotiated treaties with hostile governments and stared down enemy fleets without blinking, didn't know how to respond to a simple question about his day. People didn't ask him about his day. They asked him about military strategy. They asked about fleet movements and diplomatic terms and invasion timelines. They asked him to make decisions that would affect billions of lives. They asked him to be the Supreme Commander, the Dragon General, the conqueror of 40 systems. Nobody ever just asked if he was having a rough day. "You could say that," he finally replied, keeping his voice as gentle as he could manage. Even at his quietest, he sounded like distant thunder rolling across a mountain range. Lily's smile widened. "Well, you came to the right place. Coffee fixes most things. At least that's what my dad always said. I'll be right back with that for you." She turned and walked away, her hand trailing along the edge of a nearby chair for guidance before she found her path back to the counter. Ryan watched her go, noting the confidence in her steps, the way she moved through the space like she could see every obstacle. Around him, the cafe slowly came back to life. Whispered conversations resumed. A few brave souls pulled out their communication devices and started recording. By tomorrow, this moment would be all over the galactic news feeds. Supreme Commander sits in common cafe, talks to human waitress. But Ryan didn't care about any of that. For the first time in longer than he could remember, someone had looked at him, or rather hadn't looked at him, and seen just another tired customer who needed coffee. 3 minutes later, Lily returned. She set the cup down on the table with practiced precision, her fingers finding the edge of the table first, then placing the cup exactly 6 inches from the edge. There you go. Careful, it's hot. Thank you, Ryan said. Lily didn't leave immediately. Instead, she leaned against the support pillar next to his table, taking advantage of a momentary lull in customers. So what do you do? If you don't mind me asking. You've got that voice, like you're used to people listening when you talk. Ryan felt something crack inside his chest, some wall he'd built up over decades of military service. I'm in the military. Command position. My older brother Tyler's in the Earth Defense Force, Lily said, her expression brightening. He's stationed out near the Centauri colonies. He says the hardest part isn't the fighting or the long deployments. It's coming back home and trying to act like everything's normal. Like you didn't just spend 6 months in situations where normal doesn't exist. Ryan found himself nodding even though she couldn't see it. Your brother is a wise man. Ryan came back the next morning. And the morning after that. And the one after that too. For 2 straight weeks, the Supreme Commander of the Draconian Imperial Fleet walked into the Galactic Hub Cafe at exactly 8:30 in the morning, sat down at table 7, and ordered the same thing, black coffee, no sugar. And every single morning, Lily Brooks served him with that same cheerful smile, completely unaware that she was making coffee for one of the most powerful military leaders in the known galaxy. The rest of the universe wasn't so clueless. News feeds across 100 worlds picked up the story. Social media exploded with images and videos of the Dragon General sitting in a small cafe, having quiet conversations with a human college student. Political analysts tried to figure out what it meant. Military experts debated whether this was some kind of strategic move. Conspiracy theorists had a field day coming up with wild explanations. But inside the cafe, none of that mattered. For Lily, he was just a regular customer who seemed lonely and tired. For Ryan, she was the first person in decades who talked to him like he was just another person. Lily learned bits and pieces about him over those 2 weeks. He was military, obviously, high-ranking based on the way he carried himself and the formal way he spoke. He'd been in service for a long time, had seen more combat than most soldiers could imagine, and carried the kind of weight that came from making life-and-death decisions. But she never pushed for details. If he wanted to tell her more, he would. If not, that was fine too. Instead, she told him about her life. About her xenobiology classes at the university and how she was constantly fighting with professors who didn't think a blind student could handle the workload. About her dreams of becoming a xenobiologist and proving that disability didn't mean inability. About her frustrations with university politics and the way some students treated her like she was made of glass. They think blind means helpless, she said one morning while pouring his coffee. Her hand was steady, the cup filling to exactly 3/4 full without her needing to check. But I've memorized more alien anatomy than most of the doctors at the University Medical Center. I know the cardiovascular system of 17 different species by heart. I can identify a species just by listening to their breathing patterns. But sure, I'm the helpless one. Ryan watched her face, saw the frustration there mixed with determination. I believe you, he said simply. And he meant it. Lily smiled at that, a real genuine smile that made something warm settle in Ryan's chest. Thanks. You'd be surprised how rare that is. Their conversations became the highlight of Ryan's day. After hours of tense diplomatic meetings and military briefings, sitting in that cafe and talking about normal things felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater. Lily talked about her classes, her friends, her family back on Earth. Ryan found himself sharing more than he intended. Stories from his early military days, observations about different alien cultures, even a few carefully edited war stories that wouldn't give away who he really was. Then one morning, everything changed. Lily set down his coffee and lingered by the table, shifting her weight from one foot to the other in a way that told Ryan something was on her mind. So, I've got this assignment for my advanced xenomilitary history class, she said. We're studying General Ryan Ashford's campaigns. The Dragon Emperor, they call him. Supposed to be this brilliant but brutal tactician. Ryan froze with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. He set it down very carefully, trying to keep his hand from shaking. The professor keeps going on about how he's a tactical genius, Lily continued, completely oblivious to Ryan's reaction. But honestly, I'm not that impressed. Oh. Ryan managed to keep his voice steady. Why not? Well, take the Battle of Kelvar Nebula, Lily said, warming to her topic. According to the records, Ashford split his fleet into 3 separate groups to attack from different angles. Sounds smart, right? Except it left each group vulnerable to counterattack. The enemy could have picked them off one by one if they'd been better organized. A pincer movement from 2 directions would have been way more effective and would have cost fewer lives on both sides. Ryan felt like he'd been punched in the chest. He'd agonized over that decision for weeks after the battle. The split formation had worked, but barely, and he'd lost good soldiers because of it. And here was this blind human girl who'd never seen combat, pointing out exactly what he'd done wrong. Go on, he said quietly. And Lily did. For the next 30 minutes, she walked through his greatest military campaigns, pointing out inefficiencies, questioning decisions, suggesting alternatives. She talked about the siege of Arcturus Prime, the defense of the Outer Rim, the negotiation of the Borderlands Treaty. She'd studied them all, memorized the details, and formed her own opinions. And the terrifying thing was, she was right. Not about everything, but about enough that Ryan felt like he was back in the military academy being grilled by his instructors. This young human woman, who couldn't even see the tactical maps, had picked apart his strategies and found the weak points he tried to ignore. You should be a military consultant, Ryan said when she finally paused for breath. He meant it completely. Lily laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Yeah, right. Like the draconian Imperial fleet is going to listen to a blind human girl from Earth. Can you imagine? Hello, yes, I know you've been conquering star systems for centuries, but have you considered that your supreme commander makes questionable tactical choices? They should listen, Ryan said firmly. Anyone who can analyze strategy like that deserves to be heard. Lily's smile softened. You're sweet. But the galaxy doesn't work that way. People see the disability before they see the person. Ryan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that he'd make them listen, that he could give her a position in his strategic planning division tomorrow if she wanted it. But that would mean revealing who he was, and he wasn't ready to lose this. These quiet mornings where he was just another customer and she was just a smart, funny young woman who made really good coffee. The moment was interrupted by a sound Ryan's combat-trained ears recognized instantly, the high-pitched whine of a plasma weapon charging. Everything happened in the space of a heartbeat. Ryan's head snapped toward the cafe entrance where 3 figures in tactical gear had just burst through the door. Assassins. He saw the weapons, calculated trajectories, started to move. But Lily moved faster. She couldn't see the assassins, but she heard something wrong in the cafe's usual rhythm of sounds. She reacted on pure instinct, the way her self-defense instructor had taught her. If there's danger, put something between you and the threat. Create distance. Buy time. She grabbed the coffee pot she'd been holding and threw herself sideways, directly between Ryan and the sound of danger. The assassins hesitated for a split second, confused by the sudden movement of the human. That split second was all Ryan's security team needed. They'd been stationed around the cafe in plain clothes, invisible to most customers. They moved with lethal precision, neutralizing all 3 attackers before any shots were fired. Ryan caught Lily by the shoulders as she stumbled, the coffee pot clattering to the floor. Are you insane? He demanded, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. Fear did that to him, made him sound angry when he was really terrified. Are you hurt? Lily shot back, her hands coming up to check him over. Her fingers found his chest and started moving, checking for injuries the way she'd been taught in her first aid classes. But Ryan wasn't human. Her fingers traced over scaled armor instead of fabric. She paused, confused, then kept exploring. Her hands found the ridges of ceremonial plating, the raised texture of old battle scars, the places where scales overlapped in patterns unique to draconian military officers. Her expression changed. Confusion shifted to understanding, then shock. You're not human, she whispered. Her hands were shaking now, but she didn't pull them away. You're draconian. Ryan said nothing. He couldn't find the words. Lily's fingers continued upward, moving past his chest to his shoulders, his neck, his face. She found the hard ridge of his jaw, the pronounced bone structure, and then, her fingers traced over his head, finding the crown of horns that marked his rank. 7 horns. 7 battle spikes, each one representing a major military victory. There was only one draconian commander who'd earned 7 spikes. Lily's face went completely pale. The 7 spikes, she breathed. Only one officer has 7. Ryan Ashford. The Dragon Emperor. Oh my God. Hello, Lily, Ryan said quietly. Her eyes rolled back and her knees buckled. Ryan caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her easily as she fainted dead away in his arms. Around them, the cafe had erupted into chaos. But Ryan barely noticed. He just held the brave, brilliant, infuriating human woman who'd spent 2 weeks critiquing his military tactics to his face, and who'd just thrown herself in front of an assassin for a customer she thought was just another lonely soldier. Lily woke up with the worst headache of her life. The air smelled sterile and cold, nothing like the warm coffee-scented atmosphere of the cafe. She was lying on something soft, a medical bed based on the feel of it. Monitoring equipment beeped steadily nearby, and she could hear the quiet hum of advanced medical technology. "You're awake," a familiar deep voice said from somewhere to her right. Ryan. Except now she knew exactly who Ryan was, and the weight of that knowledge made her stomach twist. "You let me ramble for 2 weeks, Lily said, her voice flat and controlled. "About you. To your face. I sat there and criticized your military tactics like I was grading a student's homework and you just let me." "Your analysis of the Kelver Nebula was correct," Ryan replied, and she could hear something in his voice that might have been amusement. "I've already sent the updated tactical assessment to our military academy. They're incorporating your suggestions into the curriculum." "That's not the point." Lily sat up too fast and immediately regretted it as the room spun. Ryan's hand steadied her shoulder, those scaled fingers unmistakable now that she knew what to feel for. "The point is you lied to me. You let me think you were just some random military guy and the whole time you're the Dragon Emperor. You've conquered 40 star systems. You're basically the most dangerous person in the galaxy, and I've been serving you coffee and complaining about my professors like you were my therapist." "Would you have talked to me if you'd known?" Ryan asked quietly. "Would you have told me about your dreams, your frustrations, your ideas? Or would you have been like everyone else, afraid, calculating, trying to figure out what I wanted to hear?" Lily opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because he was right and they both knew it. If she'd known who he was, she would have been terrified. She never would have criticized his tactics. She probably would have asked for a different section. Before she could figure out what to say, a nurse came in, a Centaurian by the sound of the hoofbeats, and informed them that Lily was cleared to leave. Ryan helped her gather her things, and they stepped out of the medical bay into chaos. The video was everywhere. Someone in the cafe had been recording when the assassins attacked, and now the footage was spreading across every social media platform in the galaxy. Blind Human Shield's Dragon Emperor with coffee pot had gone viral. Millions of views. Billions actually. Lily's face was suddenly recognizable on 100 different worlds. The reactions were mixed. The Galactic Council had called 17 emergency sessions in the past 6 hours, all of them arguing about what it meant that the Supreme Commander had befriended a human civilian. Some council members were calling for investigations. Others were demanding that Ryan explain himself. But the worst reaction came from closer to home. Lily's university had sent her an official communication threatening to revoke her scholarship. The language was carefully worded, but the message was clear. They were accusing her of inappropriate fraternization with a known war criminal, and suggesting that her presence on campus might create a security risk. Lily sat in Ryan's temporary quarters on the station, listening as he read the message aloud. Her hands were shaking. That scholarship was everything. Without it, she couldn't afford to finish her degree. 4 years of work, all the fighting to prove herself, and they were going to throw her out because she'd made friends with someone they didn't approve of. "I can fix this," Ryan started to say, but Lily cut him off. "No. I don't want you pulling strings or making threats. I want to handle this myself." Except she didn't have to handle it alone. Because Earth found out what was happening and Earth had opinions about it. Lily's older brother Tyler, a sergeant in the Earth Defense Force station near the Centauri colonies, saw the news. He sent exactly one message to his unit's group chat: "They're messing with my little sister." That was all it took. Within 2 hours, human social media platforms exploded with outrage. Students at universities across Earth and her colonies organized protests. Someone hacked into Lily's university servers and crashed their entire administrative system. The hashtag savvily trended #1 across human networks. News outlets picked up the story. Earth's government lodged formal complaints with the Galactic Council. Humanity did what humanity always did when one of their own was threatened. They rallied. They pack-bonded. And once humans decided you were part of the pack, they would move mountains to protect you. Ryan watched the whole thing unfold with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. He'd studied human military tactics, their history, their psychology. But seeing it happen in real time was something else entirely. An entire species mobilizing to defend one blind girl because she was theirs and nobody got to threaten what was theirs. "Your people are insane," he told Lily as they watched another news feed showing protesters outside the university's main campus on Earth. "Yeah, but we're loyal," Lily replied with a small smile. "That's what you liked about me, right? I was loyal to a friend I didn't even know was the most powerful military commander in the galaxy. That's just how humans are. We pick our people and then we stick with them no matter what." Ryan looked at her, really looked at her. This small, blind human who'd thrown herself in front of assassins without hesitation. Who'd criticized his tactics because she genuinely wanted to help, not because she was trying to impress him. Who'd treated him like a person instead of a legend. "I've commanded armies for 200 years, he said slowly. "Millions of soldiers have followed my orders. But I've never had a friend who'd fight for me just because they wanted to. Not because of duty or honor or orders. Just because we were friends." "That's what friends do," Lily said simply. "They protect each other." The moment was shattered by alarm sirens screaming through the station. Ryan was on his feet instantly, his military training taking over. His communication device lit up with urgent messages. Lily heard his sharp intake of breath and knew something was very, very wrong. "What is it?" she asked. "The Zalthor Hive," Ryan said, his voice dropping into command mode. "They're ancient enemies of the Draconian Empire. They must have intercepted our communications. They know about you, about our friendship. They think you're my weakness." The station shook violently. Lily grabbed onto the desk to steady herself as emergency protocols engaged. Lights flickered. The calm voice of the station's AI began directing civilians to evacuation points. More alarms. More shaking. This wasn't a random attack. This was targeted, focused. And suddenly Lily understood. "They're attacking the cafe district," she whispered. "They're coming for me." Ryan's hand found her arm. "Stay close to me. I won't let them." The explosion was deafening. The wall to their left simply disappeared in a blast of heat and pressure. Ryan's body wrapped around Lily, shielding her from the debris. When the dust cleared and the ringing in her ears subsided, Lily realized they'd been separated by a collapsed corridor. Ryan was on one side, already shouting orders to his security team. Lily was on the other side, and she could hear something that made her blood run cold. The chittering, clicking sounds of Zalthor warriors moving through the damaged sections of the station. Moving toward her. "Lily!" Ryan's roar was loud enough to make the debris shake. She could hear him trying to break through, but the collapsed corridor was too unstable. Any more damage and the entire section might decompress. "Go!" Lily shouted back, fighting to keep her voice steady even though she was absolutely terrified. "Get help. Get your people. I'll survive, humans are good at that." She didn't wait for his response. The chittering was getting closer. Lily turned and ran, one hand trailing the wall, counting steps, mapping the station layout in her head. She'd studied the emergency maps when she first started working here, memorizing evacuation routes the way she memorized everything else. Behind her, she heard the bulkhead seal with a heavy metallic thud, cutting her off from Ryan completely. She was alone, blind, in a damaged space station, being hunted by an alien hive species that wanted to use her to hurt her friend. Lily took a deep breath and kept running. Ryan was right, humans were good at surviving. And she was about to prove just how good. The Zalthor were nothing if not efficient. They moved through the damaged station sections like a well-oiled machine, their hive mind coordinating every movement with perfect precision. Lily lasted maybe 7 minutes on her own before they cornered her in a maintenance corridor. She fought, kicked, screamed, even managed to hit one of them with a pipe she'd grabbed, but it wasn't enough. There were too many of them and they were too strong. They dragged her through the station to their docked ship, chittering to each other in their strange clicking language. Lily couldn't see them, but she could feel their hard exoskeletons, their many legs, the way they moved in perfect unison like parts of a single organism. Because that's essentially what they were, a hive mind, thousands of individuals all connected to one central consciousness. The command ship was cold and smelled wrong, a combination of chemicals and something organic that made Lily's stomach turn. They threw her into what she assumed was a holding cell. The door sealed with a hiss, and suddenly she was alone in the darkness. Not that darkness meant much to her anymore. The hive mind found her fascinating. Their species didn't really understand the concept of friendship the way other species did. They had the hive, the collective, the connection. But this idea of two completely different beings choosing to care about each other? That was alien to them. And here was this tiny, blind human who was apparently so important to the Dragon Emperor that he'd been meeting with her daily for weeks. She was perfect leverage. Perfect bait. Perfectly helpless. Except they didn't understand humans yet. That was their first mistake. News traveled fast across the galaxy, especially news this big. Within an hour, every major news network was running the same story. Lily Brooks, the blind human barista who'd befriended General Ryan Ashford, had been captured by the Zalthor hive. Her face appeared on screens across 100 worlds. The girl who'd shielded a dragon with a coffee pot, now taken by his enemies. The Galactic Council issued statements. Politicians made speeches. Military analysts discussed the implications. Everyone had an opinion about what this meant for galactic politics. But Earth? Earth had a very different response. It started with Tyler, Lily's brother, still stationed near the Centauri colonies. He saw the news, saw his baby sister's face on every screen, saw the footage of insectoid warriors dragging her away. He sent one message to every human soldier, sailor, and pilot he knew: they took one of ours. That was all it took. Within hours, every human military ship within 3 sectors changed course. But it wasn't just military. Civilian freighters adjusted their routes. Corporate transport vessels diverted from their scheduled deliveries. Even the small personal ships, families on vacation, traders heading to market, students traveling between colonies, they all turned around and headed toward the last known location of the Zalthor command ship. The message spreading through human channels was simple and clear. Come home, Lily. We're coming for you. It didn't matter that most of these ships weren't armed for combat. It didn't matter that the Zalthor were a formidable military force. It didn't matter that humans were one of the newer species in the galactic community, still finding their place among civilizations that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. They had taken one of humanity's own. And humanity was coming to get her back. Ryan's draconian fleet arrived at the Zalthor command ship first. He pushed his engines past safe limits, ignoring the protests of his engineering staff. Every second Lily was in enemy hands was a second too long. His ships dropped out of hyperspace with weapons hot and shields at maximum, ready for a fight. What he found made him stop and stare at his view screen in absolute disbelief. Human ships. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. They were already engaged with the Zalthor defensive fleet, and they were getting absolutely destroyed. Human vessels were outmatched in every way, smaller, slower, less advanced. The Zalthor were picking them apart with methodical efficiency. But the humans weren't retreating. They weren't even trying to retreat. They were buying time, throwing themselves at the enemy again and again, taking hits that should have sent them running. Ships with hull breaches stayed in the fight. Vessels that had lost main power were still firing auxiliary weapons. It was suicide. It was insane. It was the most human thing Ryan had ever seen. Human vessels, fall back. Ryan's voice boomed across all frequencies. You can't win this fight. Retreat and let my fleet handle it. There was a moment of silence, then a woman's voice came back, calm despite the sounds of explosions and alarms in the background. With respect, General Ashford, we're not here to win. We're here to buy you time to get her back. That's what friends do. That's what humans do. The voice belonged to Captain Nicole Webb, commander of a civilian freight hauler that had been carrying medical supplies to a colony 2 sectors away. She'd diverted course the moment she heard about Lily. Her ship wasn't built for combat, and she knew she probably wouldn't survive the next 10 minutes. She was fighting anyway. Ryan felt something crack deep inside his chest. The last wall around his heart, the final piece of armor he'd kept in place for 200 years of military service. These humans barely knew Lily. Most had only seen her face on news feeds. But they'd decided she was theirs, part of their pack, and they would die before they abandoned her. All Draconian vessels, full assault, Ryan ordered, his voice rough with emotion he didn't bother to hide. We get her back. We get her back now. The combined human and Draconian forces hit the Zalthor like a hammer. Ryan's strike teams breached the command ship, fighting through corridors filled with hive warriors. The humans fought with a desperate, creative fury that caught the Zalthor off guard. The Draconians fought with a cold, precise efficiency honed over centuries of warfare. They found Lily in a storage room deep in the ship's interior. The door was barricaded from the inside. Dead Zalthor warriors littered the corridor outside, and the ones that were still alive seemed confused, stumbling around like they'd lost their connection to the hive mind. Ryan's team breached the door and found Lily backed into a corner, holding a plasma-cutting torch like a sword. Her face was bruised, her clothes were torn, and she was shaking, but she was alive and she was fighting. "Took you long enough," she said when she heard Ryan's distinctive footsteps. Despite everything, there was a hint of a smile on her face. "I was running out of ideas." Later, Ryan would learn what she'd done. Lily had memorized Zalthor biology for one of her classes. Their communication system, their reliance on pheromone signals to coordinate the hive mind. She'd found cleaning chemicals in the storage room and mixed them by smell alone, creating a compound that scrambled those signals. She'd turned the hive's greatest strength, their perfect unity, into a weakness. She couldn't see, couldn't fight like a soldier, but she could think and improvise and refuse to give up. She was so incredibly, impossibly human. Ryan picked her up personally, cradling her against his chest as he carried her through the ship. Human soldiers lined the corridors and they cheered as she passed. Some were crying. All of them were proud. They made it back to Ryan's flagship, and medics immediately surrounded Lily. She was hypothermic, dehydrated, and exhausted but alive. The doctors wrapped her in thermal blankets and started treatment while Ryan stood guard nearby, refusing to leave. That's when the sensors started screaming warnings. The tactical officer's face went pale as he read the incoming data. "Sir, we've got a massive hyperspace signature. It's the Zalthor main fleet. At least 200 capital ships heading directly for..." He swallowed hard. "They're heading for Earth, sir." This whole thing was a diversion. The room went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The Zalthor had never intended to hold Lily. They'd wanted to draw out Ryan's forces, make him commit his fleet to a rescue mission far from strategic positions. And while everyone was focused on saving one girl, the real threat was moving on humanity's homeworld. Lily sat up despite the doctor's protests, the thermal blanket falling from her shoulders. She was shivering, exhausted, and had just been through hell. But her voice was steady when she spoke. "We fight together now," she said, looking in Ryan's direction even though she couldn't see him. "That's what friends do. Your people helped save me. Now we help save mine." The emergency council meeting happened within hours. Ryan stood before the Galactic Council's holographic assembly, representatives from dozens of species flickering in the chamber around him. His proposal was simple and unprecedented: a formal military alliance between the Draconian Empire and humanity. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Species that had been part of the galactic community for thousands of years protested loudly. The Draconians were apex predators, conquerors, warriors. Humans were newcomers, barely a century into space travel, still figuring out their place in the galaxy. An alliance between them would shift the entire balance of power. The debate raged for 3 hours. Politicians argued. Military leaders presented concerns. Economic advisors calculated implications. Everyone had reasons why this was a terrible idea. Then Earth's ambassador stood up and said 5 words: "Lily Brooks represents humanity's interests." The council chamber went silent. The girl who'd been captured and tortured by the Zalthor less than 48 hours ago? The blind student who worked in a cafe? That was who Earth wanted representing them in the most important political negotiation in human history? But Earth's government was unanimous. If this alliance was going to work, it needed to be built on the foundation that started it: genuine friendship, not political maneuvering. And nobody represented that better than Lily. 2 hours later, Lily stood before the Galactic Council. She was still bruised from her captivity, her left eye swollen nearly shut. She leaned heavily on a walking stick because her legs were shaky from exhaustion and dehydration. The doctors had wanted to keep her in medical care for at least another week, but she'd refused. This was too important. The council chamber was silent as she made her way to the center platform. Ryan stood off to the side, close enough to help if she needed it, far enough to let her stand on her own. Every representative in the chamber watched her. Some with curiosity, some with pity, some with barely concealed disdain. Lily took a breath and began to speak. "You see my friend as a monster because he's fought wars," she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "You look at General Ryan Ashford and you see the Dragon Emperor, the Conqueror, the warrior who's taken 40 star systems. You see someone to fear." She turned slightly, facing where she knew the majority of the council representatives were positioned. "And you see my species as weak because we're small and new and we don't have scales or claws or centuries of spacefaring experience. You think we're cute, harmless, not worth taking seriously in galactic politics." Someone in the council started to object, but Lily kept talking. "But here's what I learned over the past few weeks. Monsters don't visit cafes every morning seeking peace and conversation. Monsters don't listen to a college student complain about her classes and actually care about what she's saying. Monsters don't feel lonely." Her voice grew stronger, more confident. "And the weak? The weak don't throw themselves in front of assassins armed with nothing but a coffee pot. The weak don't survive captivity by outsmarting a hive mind that's existed for millennia. The weak don't have dozens of ships willing to die buying time for a rescue." Lily straightened up, leaning less on the walking stick. Maybe it's time we all learn something important. Family isn't about biology. It's not about what species you are or where you come from or how long you've been in space. Family is about choice. It's about deciding that someone matters to you, and then proving it through your actions. My friend chose to see me as a person, not a disability. I chose to see him as a person, not a reputation. And when the worst happened, we chose to fight for each other. She paused, letting her words sink in. That's what this alliance is really about. Not politics or military strategy or trade agreements. It's about choosing to be family. And if you can't understand that, then maybe you're not as advanced as you think you are. The vote passed. Not unanimously, there were still plenty of representatives who voted against it. But it passed, and that was enough. The Battle of Earth became the stuff of legends. The Zalthor main fleet arrived at Earth's solar system expecting an easy target. What they found instead was every human military vessel that could fly, backed by Ryan's draconian fleet. But that wasn't what made the battle legendary. It was everything else. Civilian ships, freighters, passenger liners, personal yachts, even old atmospheric craft that had been retrofitted with basic shields, they all joined the fight. Not because they were ordered to, but because that's what humans did. When home was threatened, everyone fought. Parents with kids on Earth, grandparents, teenagers who'd just gotten their pilot licenses, corporate executives in their company ships. They all showed up. The tactics were pure human chaos. Unpredictable, creative, and borderline suicidal. A freighter captain rammed his ship into a Zalthor cruiser because his weapons were offline. A group of racing enthusiasts used their speed to draw enemy fire away from damaged military vessels. Scientists in a research vessel figured out how to overload their engines to create an electromagnetic pulse that disabled enemy shields. Combined with draconian precision and firepower, it was devastating. Lily watched it all from Ryan's flagship, monitoring communications and battle data through audio readouts. She'd been given a position in the command center, over the protests of several military officers who didn't think a civilian belonged there. Ryan had overruled them all. 3 hours into the battle, Lily noticed something in the patterns. The Zalthor were being oddly selective about their targeting. They were disabling ships instead of destroying them when possible. They were trying to board vessels and capture crew members. They're not trying to kill us, she said suddenly. They're trying to capture humans alive. They want to study us. They want to understand pack bonding so they can replicate it or counter it. Ryan leaned over her station. Are you certain? 90%. Look at the targeting patterns. They're going for engines and weapons, not life support or crew quarters. Ryan's mind raced through the implications. If the Zalthor wanted to study humans, they needed to understand what made humanity unique. And if that was what they wanted, then we give them something to study, he growled. He turned to his communications officer. Open a channel to all ships. Broadcast on all frequencies, including the Zalthor Hive network. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations. They broadcast human culture directly into the Zalthor hive mind. Music from every era and genre. Classical symphonies, rock and roll, jazz, folk songs from 100 different cultures. Art from the Renaissance, from ancient civilizations, from modern digital artists. Poetry about love and loss. Stories of friendship and sacrifice. Videos of families, of soldiers coming home, of strangers helping strangers. They flooded the hive mind with the concept of individuality, of choosing your own path, of connections made by choice rather than biological imperative. They showed them what it meant to be human, messy, chaotic, emotional, and beautifully, impossibly individual. The hive mind had existed for thousands of years in perfect unity. Every member connected, every thought shared, every action coordinated. They'd never experienced the concept of I versus we. They'd never had to. The human cultural broadcast hit them like a virus. Individual Zalthor warriors suddenly had thoughts that weren't part of the collective. Feelings that were their own. Questions about whether they wanted to fight, wanted to follow orders, wanted to be part of the hive. The perfect unity fractured. Ships broke formation. Warriors hesitated. The hive mind, built on absolute coordination, couldn't function when its members started thinking for themselves. The Zalthor fleet retreated in complete disarray, jumping to hyperspace in scattered groups rather than the coordinated withdrawal they'd planned. They'd come to Earth to study and counter humanity's greatest strength, and instead they'd been infected by it. The battle was over. Earth was saved. And the galaxy would never look at humans quite the same way again. 6 months later, life had returned to something resembling normal, though normal was now very different than before. The Galactic Hub Cafe was busier than ever. It had become a landmark, a neutral ground where species met to talk and trade and sometimes, just sometimes, become friends. Tour groups stopped by. Politicians held informal meetings there. Students from a dozen different worlds came to see where the Human Draconian Alliance had started. Lily had graduated with top honors from her xenobiology program. Her thesis, Interspecies Diplomacy Through Cultural Exchange, a case study, was now required reading at military academies across 3 empires. She'd been offered positions at research institutions, government agencies, and military think tanks. She turned them all down. She still worked at the cafe. Ryan sat at table 7, same as always. Lily brought him his coffee, black, no sugar, and sat down across from him for her break. They talked about ordinary things. The weather control on the station was acting up again. Ben had finally asked out the Centaurian girl who worked at the bookstore next door. Lily's brother Tyler was coming to visit next week. You know, Lily said, stirring sugar into her own coffee, Tyler really wants to meet you. He says any dragon who makes friends with his little sister can't be all bad. His words, not mine. Ryan's mouth curved into something that most species would now recognize as a smile rather than a threat display. I'd like that. Your brother sounds like a good man. A young human cadet, couldn't have been more than 19, approached their table nervously. General Ashford, sir? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm studying the Battle of Earth in my tactics class, and I was wondering if I could ask you some questions. Ryan looked at Lily, and she could hear the amusement in his voice. Ask her. She planned half of it. I just provided the firepower. The cadet's eyes went wide. You're Lily Brooks? The Lily Brooks. Lily laughed. Just Lily is fine. What do you want to know? As she explained the tactical decisions and cultural strategies to the eager young cadet, Ryan sat back and watched. This small blind human who'd served him coffee and criticized his military campaigns without fear. This woman who'd survived capture and helped save her entire world. This friend who'd changed everything. The galaxy had learned something important in the past 6 months. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their ships or their weapons or even their crazy unpredictable tactics. It was their ability to make family out of strangers. To look at someone completely different species, different background, different everything, and decide that they mattered. That they were worth protecting. That they were pack. And once humans decided you were family, they would follow you into hell itself armed with nothing but coffee pots and absolutely unshakable loyalty. The Dragon Emperor had learned this lesson. The Zalthor Hive had learned it. Eventually, the entire galaxy learned it. Don't underestimate the species that makes friends with dragons. Because that friendship? That's not a weakness. That's the most dangerous weapon in the universe.